let's look at NICE guidelines very closely. 2005 is the last guideline produced on PTSD, and the message is very, very clear. You won't be able to read it from the back, but it's trauma-focused CBT and EMDR. So eye movement reprocessing. So let's look at this in a bit more detail. What is trauma-focused treatment? You see, what's interesting is it's a whole umbrella of different things. You know, the trouble with guidelines is that people read the front page. Nobody takes the trouble, except nerds like myself, to go digging deep into the data to try to find out, well, what do they mean by trauma-focused treatment? Well, this is what they mean. They mean prolonged exposure, image habituation training, imaginal flooding with implosive flooding therapy, imaginal exposure and biofeedback assisted desensitization treatment, cognitive reprocessing therapy, cognitive restructuring plus exposure, cognitive trauma therapy, brief eclectic therapy with elements of psychodynamic therapy. Give me a break. There's a lot of stuff in there. That's a very, very big umbrella. When you start looking at these, if you look at these treatments in detail, you see that some of them are like a million miles away from the other ones. And you think, well, how on earth did this happen? So what the umbrella of trauma-focused treatment is actually a very, very large umbrella indeed. Now, you might say, well, okay, let's look at the studies that have informed these guidelines. Well, there's a whole clatter of meta-analytic studies. Remember, this is the top level of evidence. 2007, 2009, you see very, very recent, all these were done. Now here's the interesting finding about all of these trauma-focused treatments. This is published by the people who did the studies. The common focus, in agreement across the field, is that the focus is on traumatic memories and the personal meaning of the trauma. But here's the critical thing to understand. There's no difference between any of these trauma-focused treatments. So in the literature, you may find lots of evidence for a study saying that this treatment seems to work better than nothing, better than weightless control. But as soon as you compare this treatment on a trauma-focused type with another trauma-focused type, and you look at all of the studies, there's no difference in the outcomes. You can't predict which way of working is likely to give a better result. Okay. So then a guy comes along from the University of Madison called Beanish, and he says, actually, there's no difference in outcomes between any bona fide treatments, whether trauma-focused or not. Well, this really shook the world. It was time to get the gloves off. So, we had these heavyweights, these academic heavyweights, outraged with each other's findings. So, you know, these were the heavyweights fighting the battle odds. So, the guys who'd written all the trauma-focused treatment papers said, you can't say that. You've included studies in here and you've excluded studies on this and that and other criteria. They fought back again and they said, no, hold on a minute. Your criteria are all wrong. And actually, in this 40-page document, we will take apart your criticisms point by point by point to say that actually the way you're presenting evidence is unfair. You're including, for example, just one simple example, saying that treatment X, a trauma-focused treatment, is better than treatment Y, a non-trauma-focused treatment. But when you look at treatment Y, you find it's not actually a real treatment at all. What it is therapists who are not allowed, they're proscribed from engaging with the natural things that people want to talk about in the treatment. So it's artificially manufactured, supposedly to control for what's called common factors. This means that it's very, very confusing. Now, this is what's informing NICE guidelines. But people don't really understand this, that there's this, at the highest level, this debate. Now, to me, this is what it's like. It's about, you know, whose cooking do you like? Do you prefer Jamie Oliver, or do you prefer the mad guy in the middle, you know? Well, it seems to me it's down to personal preference. And you know, what you want to do is come up with an Irish solution. So the Irish solution is, what you do is you make a load of grub, and you feed it out to the people, and you ask them, what do they think? And whichever they say they like, you put it in the cookbook, and you get the Avoca cookbook. Now that seems to me very sensible. I mean, what a concept to ask the people that you're actually working with or feeding or whatever it is you might be to get their feedback on what it is. Well, I would say that that is a pragmatic approach, that is what's sensible. It's down to earth, it just makes sense. If you are working with a bunch of clients and you ask them about your interactions with them and about their way of work, their sense of what's happening, then it seems to be a good approach. So that really is the basis of setting up a practice research network in the first place. And as I say, we're moving on now to expand that out on a more international basis.